stop the presses. Speaking of Discord, as on the previous uh, video, Strum Front Saturdays. We're going to go in there and check it out and see who else will join us in a moment. Take care. Don't take care. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. Well, I
Good.
got some company here with Carl Nogueira. Darn,
Nogueira, close
Nogueira.
enough.
Nogueira. I hope I got that
The
right.
Carl guy. Yeah, close enough. It's all good.
Close, close.
Yeah, close enough for government work. Sure. The
So,
IRS will be able to find me. Trust me.
so I was scratching my head and saying, well, okay, what are we going to talk about on Strum Front Saturdays? And I suggested to Carl we talk about, hey, how realistic is this um, game? And Carl told me he wouldn't mind um, sharing with us his 2 cents. And what I'm going to do is keep quiet and listen to Carl because Carl's a wise fellow and he's been playing Squalier for a couple of decades now, right?
A few, yeah.
A few decades. So let's listen up. Carl?
All right. Well, thanks for the intro. Carl's a wise man. Can I have you talk to my wife when this is done recording? I need you to convince her. Um, so anyway, uh, the on the question of how realistic ASL is, I mean, I don't know. To me, it's a great movie, but it's not necessarily a great simulation. Main reason for that, I mean, sure, sometimes our cardboard pieces are not doing what we want them to do. They go berserk at the worst possible times with the worst possible units. Like your 10-0 commissar who's anchoring your defense, going crazy and taking a whole bunch of folk with him. And they break, they ELR, they disrupt, they do all kinds of annoying things. And that's meant to simulate command control, but it's not really command control. I mean, even in campaign games, you can pretty much mix up areas of responsibility as much as you please. Usually units will have, okay, you get this part of the front, you get this part of the front, and so on and so forth. And one of the actual things I try to do is hit the seams between two units to cause maximum confusion, especially if they can get a breakthrough in that area. That's something you don't see in ASL. Everybody can just kind of be glommed together as the onboard force or reinforcements. So I think overall, it's not terribly realistic. There's a lot that's abstracted about it, and believe it or not, a lot that's simplified about it. For such a complex game, there actually are definitely spots where you can see where the people who wrote the rules originally decided, you know what, we'd better just kind of shorthand this and make it a little simpler more than try to make it more realistic. I mean, all the machine guns are abstracted. There's a lot that's abstracted, which is fine. Obviously it's my favorite game. I play it pretty much exclusively, pretty much a one-trick pony these days. But, in my opinion, great game, awesome game. It's I think, the best game out there. Simulation, was mez and mez. Not that great a simulation, but a fantastic movie. That'd be my take on
So speaking to your point, I'm putting down on the Vassal module um, an LMG, a German LMG, an MMG, and an HMG. And I remember on Facebook on the classic page, someone asked, "What is an MG42 and where is the MG42 counter?" Right?
it.
And
There it is, pretty much three times over, right? Exactly.
so that's what you mean by abstracted, I suppose.
Oh, right, for instance, for instance. But, I mean, with the AFVs, they tend to get a little more detailed, a lot more detailed, really, in some cases. But even there, they'll say sometimes when you're reading the Chapter H notes, the differences between this model and this model were somewhat small in game terms. Therefore, we just lump these models together. You know.
Hmm.
So again, because of its reputation among people, and a lot of times it's a reputation gained among people who really don't even play the game. So how would you know? But that doesn't stop people from giving an opinion, of course. Take me right now, for instance. And and they say, oh yeah, no, super complicated, no, super detailed. I mean, they got everything down to the last bean counted. No, they don't. Really don't. They have all the situations accounted for, but not necessarily in a simulationist manner. It's designed for effect all the way through.
Yeah.
And I think that was a wise choice because it makes it fun. If it was every bean counted and every shot counted, the location of every shot, it'd play a lot more like Tobruk than ASL. And where ASL is a lot of fun, I never found Tobruk to be all that much fun. Very much more detail oriented in terms of simulation, but not as much fun.
Yeah.
This has all kinds of wacky results. I mean, people. I'm fortunate right now where I retired and I'm working part time at a hobby shop. I'll twist my arms, and we get a lot of starter kit players in there. We've got a pretty good ASL/starter kit community out there in Groton, Connecticut, the Citadel Game Cellar. And when the guys go from starter kit to full ASL, they always say, "Oh wow, look at
Mm.
that! There's so much more fun. You got heroes, you got berserk guys. The whole heat of battle thing adds a lot. There's a whole bunch of other rules that add a lot, bypass and fire lanes and all this. It's fun because it's loosely simulating actual military tactics. It's not really getting into the weeds and the down and dirty of it. It's just giving you a game representation of
Mm.
those tactics. So, again, people who get all caught up in the simulation aspect will kind of ask those questions. They've heard, oh, this thing's a total simulation. And they'll look at it and say, oh, it's a total simulation. Where's this? Where's that? It's been abstracted in. It's covered, but it's abstracted in. It's not represented specifically. I think that might disappoint some people if they're looking for something that was like the ultimate simulation. But if you're looking for the ultimate game on the topic, which gives the right feel, then yeah, I don't think you can find anything better today.
Yeah. So in terms of tactics and um, the unpredictability of war, I think it does pretty well. But in terms of simulating a squad in terms of a fixed number of men and a particular type of of, uh, of weapon, especially at the infantry level, uh, I think you're absolutely correct. And that's what I like about this game is that you end up playing a scenario and you come across a storyline as opposed to, this weapon, uh, specific weapon was useless or it didn't have enough firepower or whatnot.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, in this system, you can have an absolute blast playing with Italian conscripts, so long as it's a good construct for the scenario, as much as you can be playing with the best German SS or American paratroopers or British paratroopers or what have you. And it does a good job with the variety of the war too. I mean, the war was fought everywhere from the Arctic down to the Saharan desert and to the tropics to the fields in Europe. And you feel like you're going from the Arctic to the desert, to the Pacific, and so forth. There are differences in the rules, there's very concrete differences in the terrain that really give that feel, the design for effect again. And I think it's a great triumph of the system, actually, is its variety and the fact that it pulls that variety off well. I've played a lot of different games back in the day before I kind of just settled on ASL, and a lot of times when you're going from the Finnish War, there, the Winter War, to the counters and maybe one rule, and here there's a real difference, and the play feels like there's a real difference. So everything interplaying together gives you that storyline that you're talking about, which is so much fun. I mean, how many times have you heard guys talking about a game they just played and they're like, oh yeah, it's 9-2 went berserk, but then he survived this run through six straight open ground hexes and jumped into melee and took out this big machine gun nest and just broke open the guy's defense, stuff like that that you'd be missing if the game was just purely mathematical tactics. Yep, you're going to apply X amount of firepower, get X amount of result 100% of the time by doing this. And, it's not a technical manual, it's a game. And a lot of the tactics in it are gamey, but they get you in the end to the right place. And it feels good, it feels fun. And that's, I think, the biggest thing. We all do this for fun, not to necessarily recreate World War II.
I hear you. Have you ever had a situation where you had three squads under a commissar, they advanced sixes up to their objective, end up breaking and routing forward another six sexes or six movement
Well,
factors?
gamey tactics 101, routing forward, routing toward victory, absolutely. And there's two versions of that. There's also the Japanese version of that, which is you have your leaders, which act as commissars, and you're defending. And you're getting pressed slowly but surely by the superior firepower of the Allied force. Voluntarily breaking and routing backwards towards victory is also something you do. And in this case, you voluntarily break the Japanese. As long as you're a full squad, you'll get two half squads out of it. In most cases, your broken morale is equal to your good order morale. Let's assume you have elite squads. You're going to break into two 8 morale half squads. Well, now you're going to run back through the jungle. 3 hexes, 6 movement factors. Your leader is now going to rally you at a minimum of a 10 or less. There's 0 leaders, like it's not +1 leader or +2 leader. You're going to be a 0 leader that's a commissar in jungle, which is rally terrain. So you're going to get 2 to that 8, but 10 or less to rally on your turn, and then you recombine them in the opponent's turn, and you're right back where you started from. The guy's got to approach you again, get shot all over again, and rinse, wash, repeat. And depending how much space you have, you can do that to waste a few turns. So you can do it going backwards. You can do it going forward. If you have a heavily wooded area like board 5 in the old boards or something like that, you can definitely break. And if you're not encountering anybody, well, you can just route forward. And the commissar will sort it out at the business end. The chafe will be uh, guys who are willing to continue, which will probably be most of them once they see the chafe shot, will carry on toward victory. It's a gamey tactic. It's not something you really see in real life that much, but at the end of the day, it all works. And forewarned is forearmed. If you know about the tactic, you try to prevent it, and it all works. I like the
I mean,
skulking debate.
you like the skulking debate. I kind of when I first encountered skulking, um, I was a bit disappointed that my opponent didn't want to stay and fight, but I quickly realized the logic uh, behind it, and I know there is the ASL world, or even in classic squad leader is where I first encountered that tactic. Nobody reloads their weapons out in the open. They take cover, reload their weapons, and then go and fight. So I kind of understand and accepted logic behind skulking, uh, based on that you would uh, you don't want to give, as a defender, you don't want to give uh, the attacker the opportunity to eliminate you, but at the same time you want to fulfill your purpose of hindering his movement, therefore pop back up. So I kind of accepted that as a
Absolutely.
very rudimentary basic tactic.
Oh, same here. But you see it all the time on the floor. A new player will pop in and say, I came across this tactic my opponent called skulking. I don't know. It feels very sleazy, almost like cheating to me. I've actually seen that posted. Everybody just says,
Mm-hmm.
hey, look, it's part of the game. If you don't want to use it, I mean, consenting adults can do whatever they want, but please prepare to have your teeth kicked in on a regular basis because it's a very important tactic, and it certainly is. I don't have a problem with it. I always just looked at it, even back in the squad leader days when I first started playing, as just the guys staying down below the windowsill, staying out of sight. When they see a little or hear a little movement out in the street, then they pop back up and start shooting. And it didn't bother me in the least. I got, as you did, what they were trying to portray. But some people, it just, apparently takes back. Uh, Personally, I never had a problem with sleaze freeze. Driving a vehicle into bypass in somebody's location, keeping it in motion so it's not so vulnerable to close combat, and tying up their firepower going out or taking down their fire lane, stuff like that. To me, that's pushing the envelope. Certainly, your tanker in World War II, when he has a gun that can perfectly well shoot these guys up from 500 yards, isn't going to say, "Oh, I got a better idea. Why don't we drive right up to that clump of woods where they could maybe run out and throw something into our tracks?" Hey, that's a better idea. You know, um, Now, occasionally, that kind of stuff does happen, and there's always the exception that proves the rule. For instance, way back in the day, God, it has to be at least 25 years ago, I did a scenario for dispatches, men from Zadig. And in the actual historical account, the Germans, there was a bunch of Parisians that were rising up with the Allies getting close to Paris. And the Germans came out with the garrison troops to try to put them down. They took over a local town hall. And the initial guys that showed up got shot up pretty good, including one guy that was just brimming with hubris. He just pulled up in a truck, stood outside with his hands on his hips, and demanded their surrender, and got cut in half for his troubles. And Germans came in and really tried to take the place out, and they brought in a Panther tank. And they actually rammed the building with the Panther tank. So that was an example in history of somebody actually using a tank in that manner, more so than sleaze freeze, but basically overrunning a building. And it proved decisive in the actual battle because the partisans didn't have any heavy tank weaponry. So, you see something like that, you feel a lot better about it, I suppose. But again, it's a game tactic. It's part of the game, and somewhat abstractly represents the advantages, some of the advantages that you have when you have unopposed armor. And I think it's a silly tactic, definitely a gamey tactic, but it's part of the game and it's in the rules. So you know what? You'd be foolish not to take advantage of it because it is a game at the end of the day, not a simulation.
Yep. Speaking of the sleaze freeze, I think Jim Bishop, he saw one of my videos and he contacted me. I forget if it was through Facebook or through Discord, and told me about how you can do spraying fire. If you have spraying fire and you're about to get into the sleaze freeze, you can spray fire into that hex before he enters your location, and then if any infantry wanted to follow up and come close to you so they can enter in close combat, they have to at least incur residuals. And I've had the
Absolutely.
opportunity. uh, I had the opportunity to use it now twice since Jim first introduced me to that tactic, and then you kind of pay back the folks that introduced you to the sleaze freeze, as they call it.
Yeah, yeah. No, first of all, shout out to Jim. Jim's a great guy. I've known Jim for a little while now, and yeah, great source for the rules. A very knowledgeable player, very good player, and I'm glad he's back from Europe. He's coming back from Europe. In fact, I think he's back in the States already, and good to have him back. Great source on that kind of stuff. And yeah, absolutely is a tactic. If you don't have spraying fire, you can just fire into the tanks So there's one less hex for an avenue of approach. And of course, the counter tactic to that is, excuse me, once you get the shots all locked up with the sleaze freeze, well, then you just run some infantry up that maybe is an assault engineer if you happen to be blessed with those, or have other squads that have good smoke. Just toss some smoke into the residual because that will now modify the residual shot. It's not like a fire lane. And you get around that tax like that. So as usual with the system, it's rock, paper, scissors. But definitely it does kind of ward off the evil spirits a little bit, and causes additional tactics to be used by the attacker to try to take advantage of what they're doing with the sleaze freeze. Yep, absolutely valid tactic. And maybe that's one of the coolest things about the system is the whole rock, paper, scissors uh, part of the rule system. There's really very few tactics that are just an answer to everything. You know, they all have their downsides. They all have their upsides, and knowing when to do what to do, it is the big thing in the game. So often you see on the forums, new players will ask, so what are the rules of thumb in ASL? I always tell them the rule of thumb is there is no rule of thumb because it's true. You always hear never ever stack, never ever 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 stack. Well, that's very true. But then again, if you're trying to rush your reinforcements up down a road and nobody can possibly shoot at you, guess what? Stacking's brilliant. You want to have your leader CX and those guys and beating them with a whip and ball and chain up that road, and normal running down a road is ill-advised if you're going to get shot at. But if you're not going to get shot at, it's a great way to get where you're going. You know. So there's always depends. There's always situational.
Hmm.
I think that's a great strength of the system. So yeah, no, Jim's spot on with that tactic. Though definitely you leave residual out there, and now you're going to make the guy work that much harder to get into your hex. And it's not even so much getting into the hex. Really, you just want to get up adjacent and fire in advancing fire into the location, try to break the infantry out of there. Because if you go in and actually try to melee them, or close combat them, you're vulnerable to ambush now because you're going to be taking the vehicle's modifiers, and those are very unfavorable. So, as always, a lot to consider in ASL tactics.
How much experience have you had with bocage?
Well, gosh, I've played that a fair amount. It's definitely a tricky rule set, and I'm always learning something new with bocage. There's always some new little wrinkle that gets discussed, and I look at it and say, all right, yeah, I can see where that's coming from. For instance, it was just discussed by Jim Bishop on one of the Facebook pages. He releases articles periodically on different rules and tactics. And he was discussing how you can shoot and prep fire if you have in-hex TEM with you from behind bocage, and then drop the wall advantage so you can't take a shot back. And I found that interesting. I always thought that you had to take the shot back, and then could drop the wall advantage. So it's a learning experience with both. Tricky, but I like the bocage. I think again it's one of those things in ASL that kind of gives the effect desired. It changes the playing surface when bocage is involved, and in interesting ways.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
I love trying to train. I'm sorry.
I think the only problem I had was with mandatory wall advantage and the fact that it applied to bocage as well. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if
and
you're out in the open or just in terrain that doesn't have a TEM, then yeah, the usual. If you're next to a wall, you got the wall advantage applies. Although if you break, interestingly enough, to have the wall advantage. So I believe once you break, you disappear. So you don't get to be pummeled by 7 or 8 shots once you break.
yeah, I guess it was a rule that I had to justify in my head somehow. Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, bocage is a tough rules subsection, as evidenced by the fact that they rewrote it.
Mm,
That's not its initial form. So that MMP felt there was a need for a rewrite tells you that it's a prickly pear. I don't think it's so prickly a pear that you should just avoid it like the plague. I think it's an interesting subset of the rules and does lend itself to different situations, like pretty much all the various terrain in the game system.
mm. A
Looking
lot of
at the
folks
board.
a lot of folks are pretty lucky that they started in ASL back in 1983. My Friday night opponent, I believe, only discovered the game quite recently,
Hmm.
and myself, I bought the classic game in 1979 from a friend because it wasn't readily available here where we live in Canada, and I was stuck with the basic game and Cross of Iron for the longest amount of time. Um, Shortly after I got married, I saw the starter kits available at a toy store at the Eaton Center in Montreal, and I snapped it up after thinking about it for a week or two. And
Hmm.
that's what I hanged on to until 2 or 3 years ago, where Alain Chabon got me playing starter kit, and then after just a few half dozen games or so, he pushed Advanced Warrior uh, in my face and said, "Don't worry about the rules. Move the counters around, and we'll reconcile the differences between one game and the other." And then he kind of gave me the path forward, and I made a video about it, the minimalist approach to squad leader. Because let's face it, I think squad leader is one of the most in terms. It should hold the Guinness World record of being the most expensive board game in the world currently.
Well, I'm sure it's up there. That's a fact. It's if you get the entire thing, if you're a completist, you'll spend several $1,000s. There's no doubt about that.
Hmm.
I mean, when you think about all the modules and all the scenario packs, and then the different publishers, yeah, you'd drop a few K easy. But yeah, great system. You make a good point, though, that people who have been in the hobby for a long, long period of time, certainly when it comes to the rules, really do have an advantage in that they've asked all those questions and they've had them answered, and so they know. And knowledge is power, and so you can quickly assess or more quickly assess the situation, hopefully anyway, than someone who's learning the rules and having to not just subconsciously say, okay, so this is that. You just take a lot for granted when you've been playing a long time. For newer players, you have to kind of go a little slower and say, okay, so there's huts in this. All right, so that's right. Huts get set on fire real easy. So by the end of this whole board's probably going to look like a funeral pyre. Okay, interesting. And it's just like little things like that that seem, largely superfluous. They really do add up, and they make a difference because when you have to think about every rule as opposed to it being second nature, it is kind of tough. But there's something to be said for the, when you're playing, just play along. Don't worry about the rules. Get squared away later. At the Citadel, where I work part time, again, we have a lot of new players, and it's fun. That day, they'll always give me a little call for, hey, Kyle, you working on Thursday night? Yeah, I'm working Thursday night. It should be pretty slow in the shop. Thursday night's generally a slow night. And they'll come in, they'll be playing. Hey, Kyle, yeah, I got a question for you about Berserk guys. Yeah, okay, what's up? And it kind of moves the game along for them, or if they start getting bogged down checking the chat, they'll be like, hey, Kyle, what's a 6 on table 6? One morale check. Oh, okay, thank you. And it speeds the game up because I've watched a couple of guys play and struggle through without helping them with the rules. It took them about 8 hours to play a five-turn starter kit scenario. And then I've helped them with the rules and called out the results for them as they were playing, so they didn't have to be checking the charts every 2 seconds. They knocked it off in about 3.5 hours. So it literally cuts the playing time in half when you're out. Popularity. So it's very true. Uh, Very true. The more time you've spent with the game, it kind of rewards the time you spent by making the game easier.
Carl, if I cut out, it's because we have a little bit of a lightning storm here at the moment.
Oh, wow, we don't want to get you zapped, man.
So
Perms are no longer
assuming that we got.
hairstyles. Okay.
So you're working at a hobby shop called the Citadel.
Yeah, the Citadel game seller down in Groton. I work there part time in my retirement. Obviously, great gig for a gamer, and it's kind of cool. I get to see a lot of the other games that are coming out. They have a great historical game section, very
Hmm.
extensive, which is nice because most hobby shops today don't. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. We got a little organized ASL group that gets together once a month for a scheduled game, and then a lot of guys drift in and play during the course of the month on their own. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. I couldn't ask for a better retirement gig. I really couldn't. The stress is virtually non-existent. Get to do what I like, and in the hobby that I like. So it's kind of cool to get paid for just minding the shop and you know doing what I like anyway. So it's kind of a cool gig.
And it's always fun talking about advanced squad leader, especially with experienced players like yourself, Carl. Um, I've been truly lucky. I mean, with Strum Front Saturdays, I kind of the way I introduced it to my friend, my 2 minute elevator speech was let's have a a forum where we can talk smack about ASL.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a
you
nice
know,
idea. A nice
not
idea.
even.
I mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
No,
Go
I
for
was
it.
going to say, of course, there are some podcasts out there that kind of do that already, but I think it's a nice idea that you got, especially on Discord, you can have several people come in and join the conversation at once. If you can get a bunch of folks together at the same time, that's even better. Table
Yeah. Yeah.
discussion.
So you're on the East Coast, I suppose, like
Yes,
me.
sir. I live in Massachusetts. You can probably tell by the accent, and but we haven't discussed cars or anything like that, or parks even. Yeah, definitely got the East Coast accent. I'm from Massachusetts, born and bred. Live in a town called New Bedford, a city of about 100,000 on the southeast coast. Uh, Fishing port, actually most prosperous fishing port in the country, actually. And that's the big industry here. And we have some beautiful coastline, and which I love because I would never want to be away from the ocean, and just love it. And now the town itself is kind of run down and had its better days, but can't complain about the view. It's definitely a nice area in that regard, and the food around is great. I'm amazed I've been able to lose 23 pounds in the last month. I've been trying to lose some weight for my health, and been working out okay, but with the food around here, boy, it's a struggle. You got to keep exercising those elbows, you're in trouble. But yeah, I mean that's one of the great things about ASL too. Is I know people from all over the world that I've played with, and you get to meet folks from all over the place and all walks of life. Just really interesting, and we help each other out, which I think is cool because we've got that common thread. I've seen numerous instances of Brian Matuzis and I kind of call it the brotherhood of ASL, and he's got a point. People just kind of jump in and help each other out where they can because they have that common thread, and they get a friendship that goes beyond the game because of that. Some of my best friends are ASL players.
Absolutely true. We do have a great community across the world. I think across the
Oh
world.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's not too many other games that are so popular that you can say, I've played guys from Hong Kong to, and it's true. You know, you just have that global community of players, and everybody's got that common thread, and it makes for some fun gaming and for some fun conversations.
Absolutely. So I guess we can conclude here. We've been talking for 35 minutes. I kind of promised you 30 to 40 minutes.
I got a big mouth. That'll happen. But it's all good. George, I appreciate the time. Thank you
I
for
appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
yeah. Oh, well, thank you, sir. You have a good day. Hey, I hope the Strum Front Saturdays works out great for you. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think that I hope to get a couple of guys next time bunched together, and we'll call this episode number three or number two. I'll have to look back at my video list, and
No worries.
I always lose track of counting. Yeah, we're the only ones in here today. All right, so have a great day. I know you're going to the beach with the wife. I certainly can't go to the beach because I'm really far from the beach. I wish I was
Okay.
close. And have a good one. Thanks for
All
stopping
right.
by. Take
Thank
care.
you, sir. You have a good day, George. Bye bye now.